everyone, welcome back to the Power of God and Anime! Woo! I am one of your hosts, the main character.
And I am the anime trainer.
Gary?
Gary has died, and
Gary's
I'm
having-
Duffy.
Gary's having some audio issues.
I'm here.
Hi, we can...
Hi, Maine. It's me, Gary.
Okay, cool. He's back.
And I'm Duffy.
Alright.
We
Somehow
did
we'll edit that together.
Okay.
My goodness.
Just leave it as is,
Yeah, whatever. It's
just
fine.
so everyone knows how
It's fine.
amateur we are.
Okay. All right. So today's going to be a little bit different. Normally, what we do is we take an anime and then we talk about the religious themes that are in that anime. But today, we're going to take a religious topic and talk about that, and then we'll relate that to anime as it happens to come up, or as it pops up into our heads, or whatever else we can think of. But so today, what we're going to be talking about is the church, and more specifically, like churches, denominations, breakdowns of the Christian church. So that's what we're going to be addressing today. In general, and it's just it's a very broad topic, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about it. But that's where we're starting off, and it will kind of evolve from that position.
Main character may have some of the most to say about this topic because, as he explained in our introductory episode, he's been in literally every church that's ever existed.
I don't think that's true.
Not every. I haven't been in Lutherans. I haven't been in Pescatarians.
Did you say pescatarians?
Yeah.
The fish-eating people.
Pescatarians are fish. That's like fish.
Those are fish eaters.
Isn't that a
vegetarian.
religion?
No, it's not.
I mean,
What-
if we count veganism as a religion, I'm sure you can count pescatarianism as one too.
No. What is it? What's the P one?
Episcopalians?
Yes, Episcopalian. Haven't been in
Lose our
Episcopalian.
15
Y'all realize that it's
Episcopalian
like
subscribers.
Catholics that don't eat meat on Fridays and have fish instead, right?
Yeah, but so it's pescatarian because they eat fish on Friday. I don't know what it doesn't matter.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay. So, so the whole concept of denominations is sort of a frustrating thought
Topic.
for a lot of people, and it's kind of like it's rife with confusion, because they're like, well, if there's one church, why are there so many different, groupings of people, and why do they believe different things and whatnot? And I certainly have opinions about that. Both historically and just because people are stupid. But I mean, we can kind of get into that in just a minute.
I mean, you're not wrong. People are very stupid.
And I mean, I'll include myself in that. I am people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so yeah, the first real like split, I would say, apart from like the apostles yelling at the individual churches for being dumb in the epistles. Apart from that, like the first real, like I think, organizational thing is when we have the creation of the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
If and you can check me on that if Gary may not be here.
Gary, you there,
Well,
buddy?
I saw his
Yeah.
icon light up. Yeah, he's
Okay,
talking.
good. Okay,
He's
good.
good.
I just wanted to-
Okay,
He's
can't
just
tell.
he's just letting Steven finish his thing.
Yeah. So yeah, and
I mean, I'll
like I
jump
said-
in.
You can't blame
like-
us for being concerned. That's all.
I will. Okay, so like I have the same understanding is because like and it depends on where you think like the roots of the Catholic Church originally are. Someone trace it back to like Peter. If that's you, that's you whatever. But more as like the Christian Church became accepted under Constantine, really where like I would feel like the establishment of like modern day Catholicism is rooted in, other than before Constantine. That makes sense.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I think history also agrees with that. I honestly don't think that you can in any way historically trace the Catholic Church back to Peter.
No.
When Constantine, I mean, he did his whole in this sign conquer thing. I mean, that's when it became like it was it was no longer a persecuted minority. It was now like,
Yeah, it was the
once in
state.
power, he's quote unquote Christian. So now I can use that to, something else people can use to their advantage, and they still do today.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Which yeah,
that's another
that's
topic in
another
itself.
topic. Yeah.
We must
Uh,
retake Jerusalem.
oh my gosh. It always bothered me. I know this is a little early for a tangent, but it's always bothered me when like Christian churches, like or if they have like a sports team, they're like, we're the Crusaders.
It's like,
No, you
no.
don't want to be
Call
the
yourself that.
Crusaders. Like, you go and you like pillage and rape the land and kill the people. Like the
And you've
Crusades
got
were,
like a carte blanche to be able to do that because the Pope said it's fine.
Yeah.
yeah, like time and time
Kill the
after again.
heretics. Yeah.
Kingdom of Heaven with it's Kingdom of Heaven with Orlando Bloom and Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
I've actually never seen
That
that movie.
is really good. Invest in it because like everything, like a little bit of what we talked about here, I'm pretty sure more that what we'll talk about is touched and portrayed in that movie in a really pristine and like educational light.
Cool.
I was gonna say it like at one point, the Muslim armies are overtaking a Christian army, and one of the priests is like, "Convert now to Islam and repent later." And Orlando Bloom's character is like, "You've taught me a lot about the difference between religion and faith." Priest. It's like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Some good stuff. So I would, invest some time into watching that. The good ones.
Anyone else hear that?
Yeah, I did.
What?
Heard it too.
It's kind of like a rumbling noise.
Oh.
The vents.
You eating today, man?
Yeah. Yeah.
That bodybuilding says feed me.
Yes.
Pretty much.
And so I guess, we can talk about all the little schisms from the Catholic Church throughout history, with the Orthodox and and then whatever else, little tiny bits and pieces here, but in many ways, each of those schisms is just sort of like, for the most part, permutation of the tradition that is Catholicism in one way or another. Even when we get to the Reformation, and we go back to like the basis of Christianity, which is grace through faith, and salvation through that faith. We still hold on to all of these like crazy like traditions, uh, even though like they don't necessarily have any scriptural basis, um, and you point to these things as having scriptural basis, like well, this is the scripture that we point to and the reason why we do it, but the real reason why you do it is because the Catholics did it and that's how they supported it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. A
Like,
lot
go ahead, man.
from experience being part of Life Abundant, which is the closest you can relate to is a branch of the Pentecostal
Charismatics.
church. Yeah. From that, the way my dad put it is, well, there's always chicken, and chicken will always be chicken, but you can have chicken in different flavors. And that's how he describes different denominations, at least. But again, my dad's really cool about denominations, which is why in our hometown, he gets together with all of the other denominational leaders and it's like, all right, what as the church body of Christ, not our denominations, what as the body of Christ can we do to help this community? And they throw events all the time that
Nice.
all the churches support, which is really cool. I I know from experience that I went to a college and they had an acting group with the uh, not Mormons. What's the M one?
Methodist.
Yes, Methodist church. And that someone did not agree with the pastor there. They did not agree with the direction that that pastor was going, and so
Uh-huh.
they split off, calling themselves like the New Methodist or something, and we're trying to create a new denomination for just disagreeing with one point that the pastor there had agreed
Well,
with.
no, you know what, that brings up a very interesting thing, because what people do is they look at what they've got right now and say, well, I don't like this one thing that you're doing,
Yeah,
and it may have
yeah.
scriptural basis or it may not have scriptural basis, and so they go off and they form something
Mhm.
else that's very similar to what you just did, but instead of people just looking at, well, what did the original text say in
Yeah,
context of when it was
all
written,
this.
well,
Yeah.
when it was written, not through the lens of the Reformation or through the lens of Augustine or the lens of freaking Plato, because a lot of Christian philosophy is actually just like Platonic philosophy,
Mhm.
uh, combined with early church thought, and it's like Plato's a cool guy, that's fantastic, but it's he. That's not Christian thought. I mean, like if you're trying to talk about like Christian thought, that's not it.
No,
Uh,
Gary said earlier when he was talking about the Crusades for a second there, said too early for a tangent. And we got off into a lot of tangents on this show, and that's pretty normal for I think any podcast or any talk show or whatever. That's basically the problem, the reason we have so many denominations though. Because instead of going back
Focusing.
to the context or the source or anything like that, we'll say, well, hang on, we want to diverge from this church and do something slightly different, and then we're going to do that, diverge again, and then diverge again, and then 2,000 years of churches later, you've got denominations that are so like they'll say pay lip service and say, oh, we're all brothers and sisters in Christ, but don't go to that one church over there because they don't believe like we do.
There's all sorts of flavors of chicken, but don't eat the grilled chicken. It's not good for you.
That
yeah,
chicken uses strobe
And
lights for
eat the grilled
worship.
chicken.
We don't go there.
in the United States alone, there are around 200 denominations.
I mean,
Jeez.
that should be a bit of a red flag, though. Like,
Yeah,
I know that we can't all do things the same way, and I know that there are good reasons to split a church.
yeah.
Sometimes there are irreconcilable differences. But 200, over 200,
And
that
it's
is
well, you
a
have it's like
ridiculous number.
because if we're in a lot of that, I feel like has to do with the fact that uh, it was co-opted so early by the government.
Yeah.
And
No,
then so
um,
once it was co-opted by the government and they said, well, this is what Christianity is now and forever, and whatever we say goes, they put tradition at the same level as scripture, and then next thing you know, it's like we have all of these things that weren't necessarily intended. And then those carry over into these additional new denominations because most of the denominations that we have nowadays are a direct response, or excuse me, are directly brought about because of the Reformation.
Yeah.
Stephen, when you say that there are 200
So even in the
denominations,
case of the Reformation, you say,
when
oh, well, Luther
I can
wanted to
hear
leave
you,
the Catholic
Gary.
Church.
Yeah, W, you
okay,
interrupted Gary like mid two
I'm so
sentences.
sorry. I did not hear Gary at all.
it's okay, it's okay. So Steve, when you say there's like 200 denominations, like, do they count denominations as like, the Southern Baptists, which will abbreviate it to SBC, as opposed to like IFB
Ye-
Baptist, Independent
yes.
Fundamental Baptist, and Northern
So I like
Baptist, and
for instance, American Baptist churches, Baptist Bible Fellowship International, Baptist.
Ah,
So like
okay.
each one of those organizational things is the case. Now,
denomination.
obviously, there's independent, churches that don't necessarily like have large organizational things.
Yeah.
Um, and so you wouldn't necessarily be able to classify them as a denomination per se.
Sure.
But as far as like larger groups of people that you could like point to
If
a
that
larger
like if it was
organizing
just
body.
like, yeah, so like even within like denominations within denominations,
Yeah. Because
which
like, go ahead.
say if you guys have a different view on this point, be feel free to share. But like when the Bible is referencing the church, like there's the body of Christ church, like body of believers, and then there's like
Uh huh.
local congregational assemblies.
Uh huh.
Oh, cool with that?
Yeah, so I think
Yeah,
there's
we get
definitely
that.
this. There's a biblical distinction between, the church as a whole and the church of an area. But the church of an area is not a place; it's the people in that area.
Hmm.
I was careful to use the word congregation,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I just
which
I just wanted to clarify.
yeah, which William Tyndale, who gave his life to have a more better translation to English, he preferred using that word congregation when he came across the word ecclesia in the Greek, as opposed to church. He used that word
Yeah,
congregation.
Yep.
Even for anybody who's King James or King James leaning, about 80% of your King James is William Tyndale's work.
nice.
I just want to, because there's some people I've encountered that they don't want to talk about the universal church, which term universal kind of throws them off. But I mean, like,
Yeah,
a
I mean,
there's
well, look,
other planets with
listen,
a church.
there's other
listen.
believers, but like
Basically, go
I'm
ahead.
part of the same church that mine in the Philippines, Mr. Valbuena, he is also a Christian, so we're part of the same like overall universal church, but obviously we're not
Yeah,
part of the same like local congregation. So
sure, sure. And I think it's important to recognize that the body of Christ, as long as we adhere to the linchpin of what the faith is, like the big thing,
Yeah.
that we can obviously disagree about things and whatever else, but we also need to understand that because we're so far away from things that happened 2,000 years ago, that and we are not all Greek and Hebrew and historical scholars, that
Hmm.
we need to be able to take our conversations about doctrine that is not the important thing
Yeah.
with some
It's a grain of
humility.
salt. Yeah.
With just some humility in the fact that you might be wrong, instead of
Hmm.
being like the doctrines of grace.
Was that a Billy Graham
No,
impersonation?
that was me being like, I'm in several random like debate groups, and
Hmm.
I don't understand it, but I talk to Calvinists and they just have a love affair with caps lock. It's like the most random words that are just all capitalized, and it's like, will you just talk?
Hey,
no,
at
we
least you
know how
don't.
to talk. We know how to argue. That's what
Yeah,
we
at
do.
least you don't have pastors that would spit on you when the preaching was getting good.
Oh, I've had those.
Oh.
Be in the
um.
front line there, just getting sprayed on.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The we're all different people, and we were made to be different and think differently. And also, the Bible, known as the living word, or our piece of doctrine is the living word. It talks to everyone differently because we all have different interpretations of how we read it. We have a different background from growing up. So I might be right in my head, you might be right in your head, and we won't even know who's like quote unquote right until the end of days.
I
So,
mean, yeah, sure. There's definitely certain things that you can that disagree on, and it might be this and it might be this, but in many ways you can definitely point to and say it's definitely not that.
yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and I
Find
think that's
something find
that's
something
where
you both agree on versus like arguing over the same thing being
well, that's why it's
different.
important to not be afraid to do scholarship. Even if you're not a scholar, you need more than just like a cursory Bible reading of like, oh, I read through Romans the past month. It's like that's
Yeah.
fantastic, but let's
Great.
actually, or it's like, oh, I did a word study where I found all the English words that match up for this word in this in the book of Romans, and it's like, yeah, but what are those words necessarily aren't the same in Greek.
Yeah, they're not
It's like
contextualized
yeah,
either.
what exactly you need to understand what the context of those things is. And so it's like there's a lot that goes into it, and that's part of the reason why you listen to somebody preach about it, or you listen to somebody, give some sort of lecture about it. But the thing about it is there's a lot there, because that those documents, those letters and whatever else are written to people that were around 2,000 years ago, that had a completely different worldview and a completely different way of understanding the world than we do. And so we have to think like they think.
Hmm. Which is hard to do.
Yeah.
It just having an being able to establish an open line of communication with someone who isn't down the line, like as like line for line as you are, is important. And like that seems like a really simple thing to like say, like, oh yeah, talk to people. But um, there's a lot of people growing up. If you weren't independent, independent fundamental Baptist, you don't talk to Methodist, you don't read Presbyterian writings, you don't even look at an Episcopalian person. I mean, anything like that. Like you can't in any
Well,
way associate, like we're talking second, third, fifth degree separation from anything like that. I made the I made the observation a while ago that a lot of people were like all Baptist hymnals, and we need all Baptist this, and like if we had all Baptist hymnal, we wouldn't have Amazing Grace. Uh, like that wasn't written by a
Oh,
Baptist. That was written by an
uh-oh.
Anglican.
very good point. Yeah.
I mean, so things like that. We would have very small hymn books. Baptists would have very limited books written to begin with, or any commentaries.
Could you even
Like
have the Bible at that point? Because I don't think any of them were Baptist either.
just
Don't start. Don't start.
John the John the
Ask John the
Baptist.
Baptist. Okay, but did he write anything though? Did he write? He did not.
You know what? Did you write anything, Duffy? No, I didn't
I
think so. So anyway,
Um, yeah, but no, I mean,
I have a
know
book
what you're
in there
saying.
that I
I
wrote. It's
I
called the
spent
Gospel of John.
anyway.
Duh.
I spent some time as a younger person in the same church that Gary is in, and you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but I definitely felt like sometimes when talking about that sort of thing, association, where almost you would look at other denominations and question whether or not they had salvation.
I mean, it was nothing. It would not be a big deal for anybody to, if someone said, "Oh, my brother goes to a Methodist church." Well, we'll pray that he gets saved. Um,
Wow.
Yeah, right.
um,
Exactly.
I was like, yeah, yeah, or Lutheran or Presbyterian, which, I mean, everybody's got, you know, yeah, yeah. I'm not gonna dive in that, but
No,
Yeah.
I've experienced that because I had a Baptist pastor when growing up. I told him that my grandfather went to the church that was 2 blocks down the road. It was it was more get up and dance sort of church. I don't know, charismatic. And yeah, he had the same kind of reaction. Like, here's this pastor in his 40s, my grandfather, who's been a Christian for as long as this pastor's been alive. He's a deacon in the church. He reads the Bible every morning, 5 a.m. Gets up, works out, reads the Bible, all before the sun's even gotten up. And this pastor's saying, "Well, uh, your grandfather probably has some problems." Excuse me?
uh, and then, like there were people even further in our, and this the pastor was like this, but members of the IFB, Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, um, and as independent as they like to think they are very campy. They are very cliche, and so so part of the IFB, if you were like Southern Baptist, like you may be saved, but you're definitely worldly. You're definitely carnal. You're definitely in danger of hellfire. So,
I ain't never seen no movie.
so yeah, you can. I mean, movie theaters. Like if you went there, you
Uh,
probably weren't saved. It's very close to a lordship salvation kind of like. Kind
I don't know if I've said this on this podcast, but at that Baptist church I just spoke of, the youth pastor there would actually stalk out the local movie theater on Saturday afternoons to make sure that none of the
no,
students
It's like,
were
don't
actually
you have
going there.
better things to do? Like, for instance, maybe actual evangelism.
Yeah, right.
Or at the very least, why aren't you prepping for your sermon tomorrow?
Right.
No, you're out here doing your sermon prep work while also keeping an eye on the cross county movie theater.
Well, I don't know about you guys specifically, but for most of the churches that I've been to, uh, the even the different denominations in my area have lightened up over the years and been like, "Oh, we actually read the Bible. The Bible doesn't say don't have fun. It actually tells us to enjoy life. I don't know why everyone was breathing down fire and brimstone 20 years ago, but they weren't completely correct.
So that, I mean, that's like a Puritan sort of thing
Yeah.
from, you know, the roots of stuff, which is this sort of concept of because in Calvinist thought and Reformed thought, you really can't know if you're saved, because, you know, because of you could just have enough grace to think that you're saved, but you're really a reprobate prepared for destruction, and your salvation could be taken at any given time. Sinners in the hands of an angry God, sort of
Hmm.
situation here.
Mm.
And so when you live your life as perfect as possible, it's evidence of your salvation, sort of thing. And so that's part of the reason that there's so much of that pressing in American
Yeah,
Christianity, because that's a really heavy, like, that's where we sort of originated in the U.S.
but didn't they must not have read the Bible very well, because didn't even Jesus say you can't get into heaven by works
So
alone?
it's not about that.
Yeah. So
It's about it's more about the whole, like, the tulip thing, you know, and you have the perseverance of the saints sort of thing. So if you are you know, doing something and it's sinful, or if you're doing something that appears to be sinful, or if you're
Ah.
even if you're just not doing well at life, even if because you not doing well at life is probably the evidence of the fact that you are going to hell. That's just the logical, like, you know, conclusion of a lot of, like Calvinist theology is Reformed
Mhm.
theology. That's the logical conclusion, and a lot of people don't like that. Like nowadays, they're like, "Oh no, it's not," and it's like, "No, it definitely is," because when you had an extremist group of people who were like really, really like keen on this is how we're going to live according to these principles, that's what happened.
Yeah.
I
Hey, I'm
once
my
had to
boy
ask.
Jonathan Edwards.
I asked that youth pastor that talked about the movie theaters why. What was the problem with movie theaters? Because like I was kind of new to the church. I had gone to movie theaters all my life, and he said it's not that there's a problem with you seeing movies. You could be going to the theater to go watch a Pixar movie, and that'd be fine. Except the people around you don't know that you're going to see that movie. You, for all they know, you're on your way to go see the R-rated movie with the sex and the gore and stuff. So you know, because it's the appearance of evil, which the Bible talks about the appearance of evil, but I mean, you can take it to a point where you can't even like there can't be the slightest
Did you
misunderstandings.
know that Hitler also drank water?
Yeah, right? Did you
But,
also know Jesus spent his time with liars, beggars, thieves, murderers, rapists, all of those?
prostitutes, sex collectors, all that
Yeah.
stuff. I mean,
I
yeah.
also I also
Remember this?
love
The
how
Pharisees. The Pharisees said, "Why does your master spend time with all of these sinners and tax collectors and prostitutes and stuff?" He
These
didn't say.
unclean people.
Jesus didn't say, "Oh gosh, you know, they don't realize that I'm ministering to them, but maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I should
right.
just distance myself and only hang out with the healthy people." Wait, that's not why I was sent here. No, no, no,
No.
no. None of that's right.
I'm the cure, not not
We
gonna hide away in a bubble.
we my wife and I love Dungeons and Dragons. We started playing years ago. We haven't played in a very long time, but it was so much fun. We played with a bunch of Christian kids, and my wife cannot tell her family, let them know that she has
Yeah.
ever played D&D, because if
Yeah.
she does, even though it was with Christian people, and it's not like, you know, there were spell books out and satanic
Yeah.
drawings on the walls or anything like that, they would disown her immediately
Yep.
if they found out, because it's just what they've been taught that it's wrong. It's not in the Bible that it's wrong, but in the 80s, in the 70s, people were having the satanic panic, and now decades later, you still can't have fun with a group of people and not be questioned as to what it was you were actually up to.
Unless you're playing Clue, which for some reason is fine. You
I
can
mean,
play a
is
Lord
it
of
game
the Rings is
you can
Clue?
play
Lord
a
of the Rings
game
is fine
about
too.
murder, but you can't play a game about phantasmal dragons and other
Because you might be
creatures.
killing people in that game,
That's what
like
Clue
in
is.
Clue.
Rings is okay though. Like the orcs and wizards in Lord of the Rings is fine. Not in
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
D&D.
that magic's
doesn't
okay.
because it's based on Bible interpretation.
No, it's
Like
not. It's not at all. Have you read the book? I read the books. I watched the movie.
I read the
It's
book.
not.
There is definitely
Narnia
some
is.
yeah, there's some religious hints,
Themes?
There's some
themes.
themes and ideas, but it's not an allegory. But they're
No,
still
it's
Yeah.
okay with
definitely
it.
not. It's
And
like,
there are some Christians
oh,
that aren't okay with Lord of the Rings, but they're okay with Narnia.
I
It's like,
saw
why?
I saw a
Why
comic
don't
that showed some guy talking to J.R.R. Tolkien, and it was like, "Hey, is this story an allegory for World War One?" He's like, "No, and if you ever speak to me again, I'll call the police." And then and then the bottom portion of it was C.S. Lewis sitting at a desk going, "If even one person does not understand that this lion is Jesus, I will kill myself."
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
you
Which
can
wait a
get
minute.
parents in churches that'll say Harry Potter is evil? Why? Because it has magic and wizards. Is the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe okay? Yeah, of course it's fine. But it
There's
has
so much
magic and
magic in that
wizards,
series.
and no, yeah, but the Lion is Jesus. So
and and
I mean,
also, it's like
I thought Jesus was a lamb. Yeah, but he can also be a
he's
lion. It's fine.
he's the lion and the lamb. Calm
He's the
down.
lion and the
Yeah.
lamb. Why isn't that
Speaking
book
of
called The
tangents,
Lion, the Lamb, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? There's too many nouns, too many conjunctions. C.S. Lewis was going to do
felt so
that.
strongly.
We're on
Yeah.
a.
You good?
Okay,
You
so
right?
um, Maine's
Okay.
losing it.
Give you a hug. Tell me where you are. I will hug you right now.
Okay, so let's kind of go back to talking about
Denominations.
the denominational kind of thing. I've been spending a lot of time, uh, and this is not a secret to anybody, uh, listening to Michael Heiser talk.
Hmm.
He is my current favorite biblical scholar, and it is just phenomenal. If you've never listened to the Naked Bible podcast, spend some time doing it. I'm probably like 40 episodes in, and I've got like 300 to go. But like, it's super dense packed. I mean, like, um, there's like the first portion of it was mainly just talking about like he talked about baptism for probably like 10 episodes, and and he's got a couple question and answer episodes, but then for 15 straight episodes we've just been in Acts, just
Yeah.
talking about just Acts. And like in every chapter there's stuff that people would like park on and like make doctrinal statements about now, and it's like you don't understand what this means historically as it relates to the Greek, and
Yeah.
how the apostles who would be reading the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Old Testament, like because that's what the apostles were reading for a lot, was the Septuagint, because they grew up in a Greek speaking area,
Yeah.
and so
Uh
it's like you're
that's why, like, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Acts is one of the most written about books of the Bible, like of different pieces of media.
I can't speak to that. I don't know.
I've heard it somewhere. Not sure if it's true, but it's also like you can you can deep dive into any book of the Bible and keep pulling stuff out for ever.
Yeah.
Just will never stop.
The Acts, it's very historical. And there's a lot of churches that are like first be a first century church, Acts church. But it's dangerous to get
Caught
doctrine
up
for
on one
today
book.
from that book or from Gospels. I mean, there are certain things, of course, but as historical accounts and things, it's dangerous to get doctrine from those things because it was so much about setting up, like Stephen mentioned, um, they had access to the Septuagint, which when Jesus stood up in the temple, more than likely he was reading the Septuagint when he found that himself in the book of Isaiah. He probably spoke that in Greek. Um, but but yeah, Acts as a whole for doctrine, like I would not recommend going out and like trying to get bit by snakes. I would
Not
Yeah,
at all.
and I mean,
advise
well,
against
because a
that.
lot of it, like, so what's fantastic in the Book of Acts is because how you literally, if something's brought up in Acts, it's being brought up for a reason, like where somebody's from. And so they go to all these places where the Jews had previously been scattered to the nation. They've been scattered to the nations, and those nations were all at Pentecost, so that they could go back home after that and then spread the gospel in those locations. Well, then they go to all these other places that have Jews in them that might be questionable, um, like where the Samaritans are, or they're going to Ethiopia, to those particular places that would have had Jews there at some point, but you may not think about that being an important area. And
Jewish.
then they
Yeah.
start talking about um, people who were converted to Judaism but not are ethnic Jews. Oh, those people count too now. We're bringing those people
Yeah.
into the fold. And then it's like, well, okay, well now we're going to talk about Cornelius, who is not a Jew at all.
He's a
He's not
Gentile.
even a believer. He just sort of like knows what the Jews think, and he's like, okay, I trust that this God's probably it. So I'm not a Jew, but I'm gonna fear God. And he's like, he's not a Christian. And God Himself says, I like that. And so He's instrumental in the whole thing with Paul. And it's like that's the first like grouping that you have. Like we're going to the Gentiles, and it's like we're going out to the rest of the world. And
Which is
Deal.
and but they painstakingly throughout the first part of Acts show that it's going out to all of the Jews, like even the ones that were converted that are not ethnic Jews. And then it's like just to make sure all the Jews, and then by the way, the Gentiles, because the whole world is getting brought into this. We're
Yeah.
Which is-
The
reclaiming
Jew
the
first, and
whole
then
planet.
also to the Greek.
Which is also how Jesus went through all his teachings as well. He started with the Jews for those who would listen, and then he moved on to the Gentiles. He's like, well, I talked to all the Jews that I could. If you believe me, great, but it's Gentile time. Now it's time for everyone else to hear.
It's Gentile
You
time.
guys have had so many years with actual God talking to you on a mountain.
Prophets
And now I'm here, and I'm
killed the
giving you
prophets.
giving you just a little bit of time, and then the rest of the world actually gets to hear me for once.
Yeah. So I mean, what's it we kind of got off on another tangent there. But I mean,
Whatever.
like that was just I'm really loving it. So if you guys, if anybody's watching this, or you get this far in the podcast, or if I really encourage you guys to check out Michael Heiser's scholarship, because he's really down to earth and he makes really complex topics historically and linguistically accessible to you. And he likes to point out that like no matter what level you're at, do the scholarship. Don't be afraid of it.
And his podcasts aren't very long.
No, they start out sort of short, but they get longer. They get to be like 40 and 50 minutes a piece.
Yeah.
It kind of gives you the opportunity, if you start from the beginning, to get a feel for it and see if you want to, rather than committing to an hour-long episode or anything like that. Talk about Jesus and the teaching. Jesus' teachings were like exclusively for the Jews, but just like with every other prophet that had ever shown up, even the most recent one before Jesus, John the Baptist, they just said, no, we reject this.
Yeah.
And we will kill you. And even when Gentiles showed up to talk to Jesus and ask for help, he would tell them, no, you're not why I came, you're not a Jew. And it wasn't until they showed faith, like the Roman centurion showed faith, that Jesus would say, you know what, I changed my mind. You know what, I am going to help you. Because I haven't even seen. I'm here for the Jews, and the Jews don't even show what the kind of faith you're showing me.
So like when Peter was like he was just going to talk to the Jews, and it's like he's not taking it to the Gentiles, and then God's like brings down all of the animals to him. Is like, look, rise, kill, and eat. And he's like, I've never eaten anything unclean. And he's like, who are you to say what is what God makes clean? Who are you to say that's unclean? And it's like, and that's a reference to the Gentiles. And he's like, okay. I got you.
But I feel like if I was in Peter's shoes, I would have been like, "Didn't you say this was unclean?" I know it was a long time
That's the
ago,
point.
but I mean,
Yeah,
I
well,
the
also
point.
that's
That's
probably
the point.
something
It's fine
Peter.
now.
like Peter
That's
probably at
probably
the very
what Peter
least thought
did
that.
say. Yeah, no, because we all know Peter has some very
He
poor
doesn't.
choices.
He doesn't have a filter between his brain and his mouth. Everything
Yes.
comes out unfiltered. A man probably swore like a sailor, considering he was on the sea all the time.
Yes.
Uh,
So, getting back to uh, church denomination groups, stuff like that. The People wonder, like, okay, well, you guys have all of these denominations, so what's keeping you from like trying to reconnect instead of keep splitting? Um, just my personal opinion. I think it comes down to a tribal mindset, honestly. It's like, because I like my group, I like my team must win kind of mindset. And once you're raised in that, it's like Baptist is the only way, Calvinist is the only way, Catholicism is the only way. Um,
Oh no, I
no,
completely agree with you.
I
it's
think you're
very
absolutely
hard to
right.
change from what you've been taught unless you've already opened up you've already opened up the book, read it, and been like, I don't remember my pastor saying this part of the Bible. Okay, what else haven't they told me? And
But even
opening
if
up
you
to different things.
but even if you do start looking into this stuff, the chances of you actually taking the plunge and saying I'm
Yeah.
actually going to think differently is so
Yeah.
low. Even if you're not an American listening to this, most people know America's current presidential election is quite divisive, and there have been studies showing that over 50% of Americans, more than half of the voting population, they're just not satisfied with the choices they've been given for multitudes of reasons, but they're still going to vote for the same party that they've been voting for their whole lives, or that their family's been voting for their
Regardless.
whole. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter that they can tell that this isn't okay; they're still going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so, if you've been raised in a Baptist church or a Presbyterian church, or more importantly, if your family's been in the same denomination for generations, you know, the Armstrong family has been in the Baptist church for generations. I mean, you're not just going to be the one to say, I'm going to step back and start thinking for myself.
Well,
And
yeah,
if you
because
do start thinking for yourself, you probably aren't going to tell anyone you're thinking for yourself because it's looked down upon to part ways.
the
Yeah.
difficulty with that is you start with like it when you have a tradition, that's you're starting with like the basically a presupposition. Like this is the truth. I'm starting from this. This is my bias already. And basically you're now parsing all information through the lens of that bias, no matter what. And so you're going to defend anything that you come across from that way. And honestly, I used to be the same way, but I've always been very concerned with finding the truth, whatever that is. And so like it's helped me because I used to be like a young Earth creationist, and like so I was like really hardcore about the Earth being only 6,000 years old, and like I would read all sorts of stuff for like Ken Ham, and it's like, and then like I was like, I know too much about science to believe any of this.
Yeah. Well, that's why even whenever like if you guys get the chance, I definitely recommend checking out a dude called Randy Caldwell. He's the dude I keep saying it has like all these doctorates in religious studies and everything.
I just wrote his name
Uh,
down because I will forget.
yeah, Caldwell is spelled Cald and then
Okay,
well.
Randy
Okay.
Caldwell.
Uh, Yes, he's really cool. I definitely recommend his audiobook on Genesis.
Okay,
Because he talks about, he's like, have you read Genesis? The first paragraph says God hovered over the waters of the earth. That means the earth was already there before even creationism had started. And I was like, that's
but
right.
yeah,
He's
so
right.
actually, so what's really cool about that is that a lot of the images that you see in Genesis are actually they take the same sort of like creation imagery from other uh, creation myths of that time, like the
Yeah.
Babylonian creation myths,
Mhm.
and they sort of like use that imagery to point toward Yahweh instead of
The other.
whatever the
Yeah.
other gods. It's like no, it's like you don't understand. Like the tamer of chaos is not this particular god is not Baal. It's Yahweh. It's
Yeah.
like, and so there's a lot of and that's pretty common, even up to the point where it's like, Elijah's like, guess what, guys? That's pretty common where it's like you juxtapose Yahweh and another deity, and it's like, yeah, you guys told this story, but Yahweh actually did the thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of echoes the book of the theme to the book of Hebrews. Strange enough, is God, Jesus is better, God is better, and the entire Old Testament is showing, hey, Yahweh is better than Baal, Yahweh is better than
all
Molech,
the Egyptian gods.
all the Egyptian gods, all those guys. So yeah, I really see that parallel.
Yeah. And Stephen, you mentioned that a bunch of it comes from traditionalism. A lot of people cannot separate tradition and their actual religious beliefs. It's
Oh, I
very
know.
hard for them to
Oh, I know.
understand. It's
We
like,
That is not a light statement
no, that's
by
absolutely not.
I sat down in college and I took up my Bible and I said I'm going to throw out everything I was ever taught and I'm going to read the Bible and I'm going to figure out what I believe personally
for
because
yourself.
traditions mean nothing. And if you get to you die, you get to the throne of God and Jesus is going to be there and he's going to say, why did you defend your beliefs? My answer cannot be, well, because my pastor and my parents told me to, because that's not belief. That's just blind
Following
loyalty
orders.
to
Yeah.
other people and what they told you to think. It's not an actual
Are you of Paul
heartset
or
belief.
Apollos?
No, exactly. Like if they Paul, you can't just divert to say, oh well, whatever this guy says is what I believe, because it's not Paul that you should be listening to. It's God. It's not Apollos. It's not any of these apostles. Not the apostles were doing God's work, but in the end, they're just laymen.
I think it's in Mark where he's talking to the Pharisees, and he pretty much says, "You've made the word of God of none effect because of your tradition. Like you've placed
Yep.
tradition over the word of God, and so like you've put that over the word of God over God, essentially making
Yeah.
His
You don't
word."
even understand you don't even understand why you have the law in place. You just follow the law.
Concerned about the width of the bands on your sleeves or the phylacteries or how loud you can cry and wail and stuff.
Yeah.
You know what? That's almost like there's a sermon in there for modern day Christianity right there. It's like, can you stop standing on the sidewalk and yelling at people about particular thing? Not, there's a time and a place for sidewalk preaching, and but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to stand there with a sign that says all of these people are going to hell. And it's like, first of
That's
all,
not helping.
first of all,
People, let's
what?
name people. No, yeah, that's a,
Because
um.
if you want to really get into it with me, I'm going to start questioning on whether or not you actually understand what the term hell means in the New Testament. Because
Right?
which hell are you referring to? Are you referring to Sheol? Are you
Yep.
referring to Tartaru? Are you referring to
Mm-hmm.
the lake of fire? Or like what are we talking about here, guys?
Oh,
Oh, don't even get started on the lake of fire. Everyone's like, yeah, that's where you go right after you die. It's like,
Nope.
have you read Revelations? Have you read Revelations?
Re-
That doesn't even mention lake of fire until
in
Revelations.
there's an intermediate state. Sorry.
Yeah.
And
Whoopsie doo.
so you're in Sheol until judgment, unless you're a
Things go
believer.
from
Unless you're a
bad to
believer now,
worse.
then you're present with the Lord. But
You
prior
get
but
you
prior
get
to that, you
fast
are in Sheol.
that's a TSA
you get
pre-check.
you get the fast pass.
Front
Fast
of the
pass straight
line.
to hell.
Um, but to bring us back to churches and denominations, like I don't want to give off the impression that like there is no church to attend, there's no congregation to attend. Like
Oh
if you
yeah.
can find a congregation, like a body of believers where you can go worship corporately and fellowship as more as as you can
As best you can.
and do it best you can as biblically accurately as possible.
Yeah. Well, just don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. And it doesn't have to be like the early church. They seemed like, based on the evidence in the New Testament, that they did meet on the first day of the week, because Paul talks about, like, I think it's Paul talks about laying up money on the first day of the week.
But I mean, they essentially met every day, though.
Yeah, but they
I
met
mean,
all the time. But it wasn't like, oh, we're going to church now. It's like, no, they went to
The
other
church
people's
goes out.
houses, and
Yeah.
they ate together, and they just they fellowshipped, and they did that kind of thing. And then the Jewish believers still went to the temple.
Hmm.
They were still going to the
Yeah.
temple on the Sabbath.
Yep.
I didn't know that. That's actually very
Yep.
interesting.
The the Jewish believers not only
I've been
kept
members.
up the Jewish believers not only kept up with the Jewish law and the Jewish tradition because they were Jews, but they also still found time to congregate and talk about the Messiah, the actual Messiah, Jesus.
Yeah, and so they it now that's why you run into in the epistles and whatnot, whereas people, it's like, stop holding on to the law so hard.
Yeah,
Stop.
it's like you don't have to.
But
It's great that you are, but
Especially if
as
you're trying to
they're
force us on new believers that are Gentiles. I mean, like,
yeah,
you're
that was a
creating, you're gatekeeping now. That's not helpful.
yeah, that was a big thing. I believe this in Acts. Correct me if I'm wrong. Where Paul found out that a bunch of Jews were doing that. They were telling Gentiles, "All right, you have to follow these laws now." And
I
Paul
think
was
that
like,
is
"No,
hold
no,
on.
you don't have to do that."
Uh,
Paul
as we
also, I
have,
mean, that's the reason Paul stood Peter to the face, is because Peter was like given preference to Jewish believers and things like that. And,
Yeah.
he still, I stood Cephas, Peter to the face, telling him that, hey, you're wrong, you know.
Yeah,
as we have yet to relate any of this to anime, I'm going to say, look, even God's against gatekeeping. Okay, so don't you go around saying you can't be a Dragon Ball fan if you haven't seen OG Dragon Ball, or you
Speaking of
can't
which,
say,
I came up with a really solid analogy earlier, and I'm going to run through
Oh
it.
no.
I'm going to run through it really
Oh no.
quickly. So I want you to imagine someone watching Team 4-Star Dragon Ball Z Abridged translated specifically into Spanish.
they've got
Okay.
like captions for like every language out there. So
No, but like, let's imagine somebody took the time to do a Spanish dub.
okay,
Okay. Have you imagined that? Okay. Okay.
Unfortunately,
We
Now
have.
I want you to imagine that this is the only Dragon Ball content that they have ever seen in their entire life. They've never seen anything else. They're going to make all their assumptions and have all their understanding about the series and the characters, philosophy of the show, all based on the Spanish translation of Dragon Ball Z Abridged. Okay? Is that you with me?
yes.
Okay, Spanish translation of Dragon Ball Z Abridged, which is a parody of the English dub of Dragon Ball Z, which is an interpretive translation from Japanese Dragon Ball Z. That is modern day Christianity. Translated from Greek to Latin, parsed through the lens of the Roman Catholic Church and Platonist philosophy, then translated to various other languages, parsed through the lens of the Reformation.
Yep. Yep. Which is why concordances are basically godsend at this point.
Concordances are very good stuff. It's really important. And I like you're saying, Stephen, that Heiser says, no matter what level you are, do the scholarship, do the
Yeah.
scholarly work, because and that goes for anything, not just in theology. I mean, if you're going to take a stand on anything, you should
need
know
to know what you're
inside and
talking
out
about.
what it is you're talking about. Otherwise, you can wind up looking like an idiot.
Yeah, well, don't be, or you could be making a statement that could actually harm someone.
Hurt someone, yeah.
Or worse yet, you could start a movement based off of false information.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and
And
there's
that
plenty of
has
those that
happened
have happened.
throughout all of history, including church history.
And I'm just going to go ahead and say, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Anyone here?
Plays well.
All right.
He meant well. The
right.
1920s were a hard time. I mean, you had
mean-
this. No,
we
honestly,
mean no ill will towards Jehovah Witnesses. Just
No, we
stop
just think you're
knocking on
wrong.
our doors.
None of that.
Stop knocking on our doors, please.
listen,
Please stop knocking.
Charles Tazewell, as good intended as he was, and you had like the student, college revival in the early 20th century. That's just a massive, I'm gonna say it, massive misinterpretation of scripture, and like the fact that the doctrines that he proposed had to be changed over and over
Yeah.
and revamped and sculpted
And
to this and that.
I think the fact that if you hold up any of that against like actual scholarship, it falls apart is part of the thing. And it's like, if that's what you believe, fantastic. I challenge you to do the scholarship to see if your beliefs hold up.
What I did may make some people mad, and my intent is not to make you mad. I'm not here to dog people. I'm not even here to like put down Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholics, IFB, whatever. But I mean, I challenge you as an individual, not just because your parents went there or your grandparents went there, but hold up those church teachings to Scripture and see if they, together. Yeah,
Yeah.
do the work.
Because here's the thing:
Put in the work.
the truth is the truth, and is always the truth. So just because you haven't done the scholarly work does not change the fact that you could very well be wrong.
And I've
And
made my
if you
peace.
are going,
Go ahead.
and if you're going to continue to just accept what you were taught or brought up to believe, does not change reality. And I think every single one of us here on the podcast can say, if presented with accurate evidence, like backed up evidence and stories that are proof that what we think is wrong, we would take that under consideration, because in the end, it's not about us being right. It's not about us being right now. It's about us being right in the end,
Yeah.
because we'll all be wrong on something. But I don't want to live a life based off of misunderstandings. I want to live a life where I understand what's going on.
I've thrown away countless, understandings of what I would, of what I used to believe about things. And I think that's how you're supposed to be, because if you're learning properly and you're not just sitting in a hole, with with your head in the sand or whatever, you should be growing and changing and learning and applying your reason to the stuff that you're talking about. Because I've talked to plenty of people that seem otherwise intelligent, but when you address something that illogical flaw in their argument because it doesn't make any sense, they say, "Oh, that's just a mystery of God." Or they'll say something like, "Oh no, that's just human logic and you should pay attention to this doctrine." But you know what? I'm saying, where did that doctrine come from? It came from human reason based on somebody making logical conclusions from stuff that they had understanding about that they could have been wrong about, and now you're taking it as base fact. Oh no,
Yeah.
that's just the Bible. No, it's not. No,
Yeah,
it's
there's
not.
And if you're going to argue that, argue something spiritually and say you can't use that argument because that's based on logic, are you saying God's irrational?
right.
Doesn't abide by logic? God made logic, you realize. Like, if you believe God made everything, he also invented the principle of being rational, being logical, that conclusions have to come from somewhere. Like, God didn't just decide that, humans are going to use logic, but I'm going to use random number generators.
I really wish we had a GIF of that.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Like, this doesn't make any sense. Well, I guess I'll just believe it because that's what the church told me, because it's
Yeah.
the mystery of God or something. Or maybe there is a logical explanation for these things. And if you just pretend that there isn't, you'll never find it.
There's very little in specifically the Bible, without like delving really deep into it, that can't be explained logically. Like, there's very little mystery to God of what we've been like, what we believe in our scriptures and everything. So whenever someone says the mystery of God, it's like, okay, is it something that you just found doesn't have a lot of reference in the Bible? Like, is there only one scripture relating to it? Okay, I can kind of see your argument there. Let's try and backtrack, do a history lesson on it. If we still don't find any, whoop-de-doo. It's not a big deal.
So I mean, it's just about trying to find as close to the truth as you can get using the tools that you have, and logic and reason are tools for you to be able to, because if you deny logic and reason, you literally have no grounds to argue anything.
Nope.
You
Nope.
you might as well just stop talking.
Yeah, if you're not using logic and reason, it's basically like, why am I arguing with an insane person? Because only an insane person argues without logic or reason.
At that point, you may as well just join the Westboro Baptist Church, because all you can do is yell and scream and
Hey, listen,
act like someone.
I'll say one thing about Westboro: they're at least consistent Calvinists.
Calvinists.
Oh,
Calvinists
Lord.
hurt you, Stephen. We
Lord.
need to talk about what Calvinists.
Listen,
Where did
they-
the
Again-
point
over
on the
here.
doll? Where the
Hold on,
Calvinists
hold on,
hurt
hold
you?
Again,
You're dogging on my boy Jonathan Edwards. Hands and sinners in the hands of
if-
angry God. All right.
yeah, if
Listen,
anyone can,
I'm
why you
not
hating on my
gonna
boy?
listen. I've got some serious beef with Calvinists, and part of that has to do with the doctrine being trash, and part of that has to do with the people who hold the doctrine being insufferable jerks.
Yeah.
All of them are that way.
Pretty sure that's called an ad hominem, but
yeah,
you know.
to be fair, the ones who can point out the most flaws of different denominations are the ones who like are just firm believers of Christianity in general. You don't see like atheists taking on specific denominations. You see atheists taking on Christianity as a whole whenever they try to argue.
Yeah,
Although
Um,
sometimes they might actually just pick on one specific
yeah,
concept,
but
like
that's more because it's an easier target at that point.
Mhm.
So whenever we're talking about these things for our listeners, we're doing it out of just, it's not, there's no hard feelings. And if you are part of any of these denominations and you're like, well, you guys don't understand, it's like, feel free to leave us a comment or
no,
something, and
Absolutely.
we'd love to
absolutely.
listen
So
to you.
I want to go ahead and say, like, I'm obviously being a little ridiculous right now. I'm being a little over
Are
the top.
Stephen? Yeah.
But
I mean, that's not uncommon for any of us here to go a
but
little over the top.
it comes from a place of
Uh-oh.
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 Steven died.
Steven
Okay.
died. Steven's gone.
It's got to him.
All right.
One,
Dang it.
one of the
The Cal-
Calvies got him.
having had
The Calvinist
okay, he's
got
back.
Steven. Oh,
discussions
hey.
He's
where
back.
the problems.
Oh, the Calvies got you.
Hello. Okay. Well, I heard you guys completely, so I don't know what. Anyway, it
Yeah.
just comes from a place of having had these conversations over and over and over again. And these are really, like, anybody who's listening to this is not a Christian, you're not going to understand this stuff, and that's perfectly fine. It's really in-house stuff, because it's people, it's, because for the most part you're gonna find very few Calvinists, very few Arminians, very few, if you want to, like, go across the board for denominations in general, you're going to find very few of those people that say, if you do not believe exactly as
Yeah.
I believe doctrinally,
But there's
then
still,
you're not
like you said,
saved.
people.
There's very few of those people.
Oh, yes.
'Cause
Some of
there
them
are some
don't take
hyper-Calvinists
that,
would
but
say Calvinism
there are
is
those who
the
do.
gospel, and if you
There
don't believe it,
people
then
you can learn.
you're,
Even
don't
someone who
understand.
doesn't line up directly.
but
we've been saying this the entire
There,
podcast.
I understand that is not all.
There may be
all,
someone who doesn't believe
all
exactly as you do, but you can still learn from them. You can learn from Calvinists. You can learn from Arminian. You can learn from these people, and you can, eat the meat and spit out the bones, so to speak.
Absolutely. In fact,
for instance, Jonathan Edwards, one of my favorite statements of the faith is from him, and it's that you contribute nothing to your salvation other than the sin which made it necessary to begin with. Like I said, one of my favorite things. Is he 100% right on everything? Probably not. But ending, yeah, maybe not. Yeah.
And does he necessarily also mean exactly what you think he means?
Leave
with
the
that
man
statement?
alone.
Probably
He's been
not.
dead
He's
for
been dead
300
He's
years.
probably meaning is that you
No, see, the thing is,
were-
you're
you
still
were
saying, you can
regenerated
still
before you
learn
were
from people you disagree with. I would take that one step further and say the more you agree with someone, the less potential there is for you to learn something from them.
I'll leave him alone.
Because you already agree with them. There's going to be an inverse ratio. So if you don't agree with somebody so much, listening to them with an open mind, you might find things you never thought of that actually do fit, that do make sense to you, that you will be able to accept. Even if you can't take everything they say and go with it.
Yeah. And and I would encourage you, if you're on any sort of, like,
Yeah.
fact-finding journey, don't be
And
don't
also
be
find
surface
more
level
than
with
just
it.
one source. Don't leave
Try to
everything
find
to one
scholarly
source.
sources.
Yeah.
go to like the people
Like,
that
I don't
spend
agree
their
with
lives
everything that
studying
my
this stuff
church
and
does
like
or
really
says.
like dig into
I don't
that.
agree with it all, and
Um,
I probably agree with
yes,
any
please,
church
please find more than one source.
less than I used to. I used to just accept everything that was told to me. These days, there's probably a lot more differences between me and my local church or any of my local churches nearby that we would have in common these days. But I still go and I still listen because I'm not even 30 yet. There's plenty I haven't heard, I'm sure. And there's plenty that's going to change up my beliefs in the next decade. So throw it at me. Your worldview, if it can't hold up to any sort of scrutiny, it's not a worldview worth having.
And to be fair, you don't have
In
to have
fact, it's
as long if
probably
you don't have to
easier
have
if you
perfect
don't have perfect
understanding
understanding, because then
for
if you're just
God to
allowing
use your
uh, to
speech
quote
or your interaction with
the life
someone.
abundant
Uh,
way of saying, or the Assemblies of God way of saying things, to let God speak through you, it's probably easier to do that than letting your brain get in the way. Crazy. Yeah, it sounds crazy. I know.
no, I get what you're saying. Like, and that now that from an outside perspective, that
Yeah.
sounds
So
sort of
that's just for
crazy.
those who actually
Um,
understand what I'm
but
talking about.
but people who have
And
not
there
been
are
led by the
plenty of
Spirit to say
reasons
things,
to
it it won't make sense.
forego strict loyalty to your pastor, your denomination. Loyalty to people is often something that can be exploited. It can be misplaced, which is why an open mind to being wrong is always going to be really important. Um, when you have loyalty like this kind of stuff that just becomes so ingrained in you or in your family or in your church body, you start letting things get out of hand. There have been numerous scandals in churches that have hurt people that were allowed to happen because no one was willing to step up and say, "Hey, this is wrong."
You know what, Duffy? You bring that up. That's an entirely different thing. It because we're talking
To
about
leaders,
People.
traditions and stuff. But now, if we break it down even further into individual churches, we have these loyalties to not just traditions, but to like
Yeah.
to leaders, and it's like
Yeah,
these leaders are on
I think
some
the
level
easiest
like
thing to look at is say,
infallible,
well,
and
look
it's
at
like
all
no,
of the
the
little boys
pastor
that have been
said
abused
this,
by
and
the
it's like
Catholic
pastor's
Church.
just a
But
man.
it's not just a Catholic Church thing either. I mean, there's plenty of churches with sex abuse scandals.
There's
Unfortunately,
plenty of
that and it's,
organizations with
there are
say blah,
there
blah,
are.
blah, 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 blah.
I'm singling out the church because this is a theological podcast.
Yeah.
But I mean,
um, I was saying, yeah, and just pretty much in line, echoing what Duffy was talking about is,
You were saying something, Gary?
because of loyalty to a person or to a certain group, even when there's misconduct in the church or there's abuse allegations in the church and there's evidence of it, instead of dealing with that in the appropriate channels and manners, it's swept under the rug, or it's moved from the West Coast to the East Coast. And I mean, yeah, like I'm just gonna leave that alone for a second. But I mean, yeah, it's crazy
Yeah,
where we've made idols out of
like I've
people
I've heard.
in our lives.
Yeah,
Um, thing when I was younger,
Yep.
and Steve, you probably know who I'm talking about. Is there was a member of the church and not the pastor,
and
but
that's
those
exactly what it
who
is.
he kind of vied for the attention and he made the youth vie for his like attention and his like approval. And unfortunately, like I was like one of those teens who wanted like I wanted to make this guy like proud of me. There was never like any like sexual misconduct or anything like that with him. Let me be clear with that. But like it almost became cultish in the way that uh, kind of contorted all of us to like, instead of finding acceptance in God, we wanted to find acceptance in him, like we want to be invited to his house. We wanted to go out with him and his family after, church or something. So yeah, definitely being loyal to a person as opposed to, Christ as opposed to the Lord is definitely like a huge, huge issue that people want to just dump on a certain organization or a certain denomination. But I mean, it is widespread, and that would be, a topic for another podcast. But
and it definitely, I think that's a big like a part of this idea, because we're not, when we're not looking at what is we're not looking at Christ specifically, and we're not looking at the what was taught to us by the apostles, and about how to be Christians as a group, and we focus on these traditions and we focus on individual people, we end up with these problems, because it's like the apostles wouldn't have, like, when they were put on pedestals themselves, and they were like, no, stop, quit doing that, like they, and so we should learn from them and do the same thing when we find ourselves even putting ourselves up on a pedestal as being infallible, or as being like, you know uh that we are basically can't do anything wrong, that we need to be able to step back and go, oh, I'm messing up, and we need to be able to call that out in other people too, because it's very Christian to do
And
that,
there are
is
some
to
people
say that,
that'll
no,
say you shouldn't do
you,
that anyway, because
Christ,
they'll go to
not
the
you,
story about if there's a
Christ,
speck
not
of
you.
dust in your brother's eye and there's a plank in yours, you shouldn't bother talking about the speck. That's not what Jesus said. He said take the plank out of your eye and
And
then
then
approach your
talk to
brother
him.
about the speck of dust in his eye. He didn't say stop with yourself and never judge anyone else, because people will go to was it Matthew 7:1, judge not lest you be judged. That's not the context of that verse. Approaching people, talking to them about where they're going wrong in their life, that's kind of important. You wouldn't just let somebody, walk into traffic because you don't want to offend their morals or their sensibilities. You want to tell them especially if you love that person, yeah, warn them about stuff. And
what's that
this goes to people in the church.
in Proverbs? The wounds of a friend are better than the kisses of an enemy.
Mm,
Yep.
Iron
that's true.
sharpeneth iron. So a man sharpeneth the countenance of his friend. I mean, it's hard and it's difficult, but it's necessary. You know,
Now,
is this an
Maine,
anime
you
podcast?
not today. It's not. Maine,
Sound
you were saying that it's not just churches but it's also organizations that can fall into this trap of being too loyal and stuff. Um,
uh yeah.
these people
I was
can
more referring to the sexual allegations and stuff like that, because
okay.
everyone, whenever it comes to anything religious or church related, everyone tries to find every fault with the church because we hold ourselves to a higher standard, like we should. um but they're like, oh yeah, it's fine if Apple gets away with it, but you guys, the Catholic Church, you can't do it.
You're a hypocrite. You know what? We're all hypocrites, and
Right.
that's kind of the problem.
Well, yeah, they but so this whole concept of having leadership that it can take your organization down away from its original intention. Um, and we talked about this a little bit prior to the podcast, but like in Fairy Tale, when you have the individual guild leaders that either break off and make new guilds, or they have there's a new leader for an existing guild, and then all of a sudden everything starts to change, and people they're doing things that they wouldn't have normally done
Yep.
before,
Hmm.
That's what the guild
that
leader
they might
wants.
disagree
How do
with,
I
but they're going
appease?
to go with it
And
because
that is
that's the leader.
basically tribalism. And tribalism can be bad in and of itself because it just is. But then when the leaders, people in charge with all this influence, realize that they have that influence on you, on a group or whatever, that's when they'll start exploiting it, and that's when they'll start using you. And they just think, oh, if I just say the right words here, then everything's going to go my way. Um, this happened recently. I saw. I follow a lot of different kinds of people on Twitter. all people that are very distinct, very different in beliefs from me. So I have people on my Twitter that I follow that are like hyper conservatives that are voting for Trump, and others that are like pure on socialists that just want nothing to do with America or something like that. Like so, politically, religiously, spiritually, all corners of all this stuff. And I don't follow them so that I can pick fights. I follow them so I can, because well, maybe I actually am interested in the person, or because it's just good to be around things that's not an echo chamber. But when Netflix came out with That Which Shall Not Be Named, speaking of child exploitation, everybody
Oh yeah.
on
Yeah.
all corners of the intellectual spectrum, whether you were right wing or left wing, or an atheist or a Christian or a Muslim or anything, everyone was disgusted that they would think it was okay to put something that exploited children in this way onto their platform.
And it's
Everyone
still
was
up.
against it, and it's still up.
And it's still up.
But the thing, everyone was against it, and after it came out, and people were still adamantly against it. You know what I started seeing? Big news outlets online saying this Netflix movie called Cuties has been the target of a right-wing conspiracy. I'm sorry, everyone was against this from the get-go, and you think, oh, well, if we
Yeah.
call it a right-wing conspiracy, then that means that the people that aren't right-wing will assume that this is okay or something? Because no, they can think for themselves.
And there are some people who defend the movie. There are some people who defend the movie, and you know, it's like, well, they understand that it's a, you know, it's freedom of speech, and there's not actually anything like illegal that's happening.
Certainly,
You know,
yeah.
that's not really
The point is
The point is
that
it's trash.
it's not illegal. Is it immoral? Probably.
And I love when people were like, "Well, if you're against this, you should also be against like dance
Was it
moms
toddler
and child,
divas or something like
you
that?
know,
Toddlers and tiaras.
Tiaras. Yeah.
What
Yeah,
do you
you
call
know,
them?
guess what? I am against that.
I am.
I'm absolutely. I've been
Yeah,
against
that
it
kind of
since
stuff.
it was
Like,
a
yes,
thing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Since I first heard of it. So don't tell me that I'm being a hypocrite because I think all of this is crap.
It's like, oh, you
Yeah,
think we should
we should.
get rid of
Because how
pageants too? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Children should not be on stage, you know, dressed in makeup and
they're
you know,
children.
dancing and like making kissy faces at you. Get up.
There's
No,
something
quit.
to be said for the innocence of a child.
And you know, we can easily point at the different kinds of people and be like, well, like you're consuming it, and so that's bad. And it's like, but then there's also the people that are pushing their children into those things, and for one reason or another, if they're trying to live vicariously through their kids, or if they're just like, oh, I want to do this so that I, you know, the kid can get famous or whatever. It's like,
Boo boo.
And how often
not-
does that even turn out okay for the kid in the end when they get older?
Don't do that.
It doesn't. It if it does,
It
that's
doesn't.
a rarity.
It doesn't.
The Jackson
and
Five.
you just
in those
putting
kind
them.
of cases.
Oh, you just and it's not just
Please.
like beauty pageants and stuff. You like you know, people talk about kid actors. I mean, you don't even have to say. You said the Olsen twins. You know exactly what happened to those girls. You know, they were started off acting as babies. Look what happened to them in the end. I mean, I hear that,
They
and
made, like,
it just and
infinite
it wasn't
amount of
even like
money,
a sexual
and then-
thing. It wasn't body exploitation or anything like that. They were playing little girl on Full House. Maybe being around Bob Saget was the problem. That man's foul mouth in real life. But I mean, those girls just wound up like in drugs, and they ruined their lives, and somehow their little sister wound up escaping all of that, and she plays the Scarlet Witch in the MCU now.
And now everyone likes their little sister better anyway.
Yeah,
so.
everyone likes her. But it's not just about the beauty pageants. It's like you need to have some heavy parental involvement if you're going to be putting your kids in the limelight, because someone's got to be watching out for them and making sure this doesn't affect them.
Oh yeah, because we know that the world is a crazy, evil space where people just do whatever they want, and if you leave somebody who's very innocent, who has no power and sometimes no ability to speak, they will be
Yeah.
mangled up and you know, tossed aside because people don't care. Like sometimes people don't attack other people because it's like, oh, if I do that, I'm going to be harmed. But it's like, oh, look, child, they can't hurt me. And I can somehow use my superior intellect and position as adult figure to
and there's
convince them
always
that
going to
this is
be like
perfectly fine.
in the end, what does it do? It just influences the way that they perceive the world. It's the way they perceive reality and how they perceive people. I think it's definitely more harmful when it comes to putting them in the spotlight like that. But you can't. Someone will probably make the argument that, well, hey, technically, raising a child in any environment is going to influence them that way. Yeah, but that's why the parents should probably pick the environment, and that choice shouldn't be Hollywood. Maybe.
Yeah. Also, this has been a really long tangent.
We have been doing this for a while.
In any case,
In any case, the church denominations are like fairy tale guilds, and that's the whole point of this.
Do a part 2.
Yay!
We need to have a
Anime.
theology part and then an anime part. So this is part 1.
Oh gosh, I'm gonna be here for a while.
I mean, it's pretty. There's a lot of conversations that can be had about denominations in general, and we broke into a little bit more about the people involved in those denominations, the leadership involved in those denominations too, and I don't know that we'll ever get away from it because
Different.
humans are so. Well, no, we're so like want to be tribal, like you were saying. We're so tribal that we don't want we just like, no, this is what I'll defend it to the death.
Why would you do that?
Why are you defending it? Yeah, exactly. Like, why are we doing? Have you examined these beliefs? And it's like, is it a situation where that if you change your belief, all of a sudden we're going to cut you off and can't talk to your family anymore, and you might as well be dead to us? Because that doesn't sound like a defensible worldview. That sounds like somebody is blackmailing you and saying.
Has anyone seen this?
Manipulative.
I swear this is not a tangent. Has anyone seen the trailer, season 2 trailer for The Mandalorian?
I haven't even watched the first one, so
okay. So, the armorer tells the Mandalorian that you need to take this child. There was this group of magical space wizards that were our enemies, ages ago. That's where you need to bring the child. And he's like, you want me to bring the child to a group of enemy space wizards? Why would I do that? And what is her response? This is the way. And I'm like, that's not an answer for someone who has obvious concerns, but it's also the answer we give people in church for why our denomination does it this way, or why does our church do it this way? Because this is the way. This is the way it's been done for ages. That's still not an answer. And that's not doing the scholarly work. That's not researching it.
And asking a question does not make
it
bad.
Absolutely not.
Not only is it okay to ask questions, it is preferable that you
ask everything.
Go ahead. Going back to the Book of Acts that we mentioned before, when the apostles preached and they're talking about some and listened and some didn't, and then you had the Bereans who were like, we're going to search this more. We're going to do some more studying. And like they mentioned how noble like the Bereans were to figure out more before they came to like a rash decision about anything. Like be like that, don't just make a rash decision one way or another. Like you get something like put it to the test against something, measure it up against something.
Absolutely. And you no matter what you come up with, as long as you are seeking the truth, you're going to come out better than you were at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been fully prepared that what if I somehow stumble across solid, irrefutable evidence that I'm absolutely wrong about my faith. It's going to completely screw up a lot of the experiences that I've had because I don't have any other explanation for them. But like, I've prepared for that because it's like maybe I could be wrong. I have faith that I'm not wrong because there's been some things, but and all the evidence that I've looked into points in the direction of that being the case, but I'm prepared for it not to be. Yeah, but can you say that about what you believe?
Question. and don't be afraid of the answers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't be afraid of the answers. Unless, of course, you somehow get the answer murder someone, then you should probably be afraid. Yeah.
In that case, you've probably been talking to me a little bit too long. But
Okay, new
Or
plan.
Jeffy.
Kill everyone. Take money.
everyone,
As Thomas Jefferson said, question with boldness even the existence of a god, because if there be one, he must more approve of the homage of reason, than that of blindfolded fear.
That pretty much sums it up.
That always question stuff, because there's no such thing as a stupid question, and if someone tells you, "How dare you ask
There's a
that?"
stupid, yeah.
If someone says, "How dare you ask that about church or about God or about the scriptures?"
Who are
should-
you, oh man?
If I hear that one more time in response to an objection or a rebuttal, stop taking the Bible out of context, dang it.
Yeah.
Who the context for that, for the record, is who are you, oh man, to be upset about God, including the Gentiles?
Yep. Which
That's what that's about.
Yep. Stephen, just so you know, with your analogy about a Spanish dub of Dragon Ball Z Abridged,
Yeah.
I could not stop hearing Senor Nappa in my head. And now I really, really want a Spanish dub of Dragon Ball Abridged.
What if it was just like completely redone by the original by Team 4-Star with just Spanish overtones? Like have Spanish voice actors, because I doubt that they can all do it.
And it's
Yeah.
their own jokes.
Like but
you doubt Mexico X. Don't doubt Mexico.
That'd be great. But Toei probably wouldn't like that either.
No.
well, you know.
But
Speaking of Toei, they didn't. Okay, so I'm sorry, I got to bring this up because I'm confused at this. And I know, Maine, you do a lot of editing for YouTube videos right now. So
Okay.
we did that Vegeta fighting analysis video.
The
I
Ginyu thing.
had to blur out the whole Ginyu thing because
Yep.
Toei kept claiming it, and
Yep.
I re-uploaded it. And I re-uploaded it, the whole thing in its entirety without blurring. It's going to live tomorrow. Toei doesn't care anymore.
Yep.
It's the
but
same
just
footage.
that section by itself, the whole
Yep.
thing.
Yeah, no. So, here, let's go. I'll answer this. I'll answer this later. Let's end the
Okay,
podcast
that's fine.
first.
All right. So this was fun. It was kind of
All over the place.
we get off on rabbit trails a lot, but that's fine. That this is our time to have fun and talk about theological principles. And at some point, we're going to find something that we all disagree with each other on, and we're going to have an argument. But some point.
Know you guys well enough to argue with you. Like, like I'm still like wanting you guys to like me. So like, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Don't
All
worry.
right, let's wrap it up and then talk about what we're going to do next
Cool.
time.
All right. So if you want to end us out there, Maine, let's go ahead and finish up.
Okie dokie. We'll go for the same energy then.
Adios.
Well, ladies and
Senor
gentlemen, I
Napa.
hope you have enjoyed this podcast once again on the power of God and anime, and we hope to see you next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Abridged.
Jose.
Alrighty.
In Spanish.
In Spanish.
So,
Alrighty.
bye-bye.